Lauri Rosendahl from Nasdaq Nordic, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. So we have an inconclusive election result. What does that signify to you, and how long do you think it will take to form a government?
Well, because it's a very tight race, we need to first of all wait until Wednesday. I understood that the remaining votes from abroad will be in before we know the decisive result. So that's the first milestone. And then of course we need to have tough negotiations between the political parties, because it's more or less like a tie between the blocs. And they really need to start to negotiate on how to take this forward and how to form a government.
We also have a political upset. The arguably populist party, the Sweden Democrats, the anti-immigration force, got nearly a fifth of voters behind them. What does that signal to you?
Well, I would say first of all their success was not as big as actually many expected. So,
but as I say, still
thing.
Nearly a fifth of voters backed them.
And I would say it's not that different from what we've seen in other European countries. So from that point of view, I don't really see that as a major issue. But of course it is an issue in terms of Sweden having a lot of immigrants, and there is an integration challenge that the former government or the current government is already trying to work with. And of course that is work that needs to continue, irrespective of who is in the government.
You say that Sweden has a number of challenges, immigration being one of them. What does that mean economically going forward? Does it mean anything?
Well, the positive thing is that the Swedish economy is doing fine and has been doing fine ever since post the financial crisis. So I think that it's not an imminent challenge here and now for the economy as such. GDP growth is really strong. There's a really good and vibrant corporate sector, especially in the startup, scale-up, entrepreneurial part of the economy that's really developing very nicely. And jobs are being created as we speak in I would say, impressive numbers. So, and I definitely think that despite the election forming a bit of a challenge in terms of how do you create a government in a new setup, I think that the economy will keep on developing favorably.
You say that the economy will keep on ticking. What does that mean then for Nasdaq Nordic, and what does it mean for the companies that are listed on your exchanges?
I think that what it means for us, if we start there, is that we still see a very good flow of new companies coming to the public market, both big and also small. And we kind of stand out in a European context in the way that we actually have a lot of SME companies that come to the public market, raise capital for the company, driven by entrepreneurs, for the companies to take the next step in their growth story. And that really drives our market currently. And we have already listed in our Nordic markets more than 60 companies this year. And it seems like we are heading towards a very good number for the full year. And last year we listed 115 new companies in our Nordic markets, and 80% of those were in Sweden. So it's really Sweden driving here and showing kind of a role model of how public markets can really be there to support companies in their growth.
One of the problems, though, one of the challenges that I've heard talking about here in Stockholm going forward when it comes to the government, and if we would see a weak government, it would be difficult for a weak government to deal with a potential downturn further down the line, however close or far that downturn may be. Do you share those concerns?
Well, of course. I mean, of course, it's a bit of a challenge in terms of having a weak government or a strong government, and we are in Sweden used to having pretty strong majority governments, but I think we are already getting into now a new form of working together, and the political parties need to find new and better ways between the blocs to work together. And we have now already 4 years of a minority government from the social democratic side, and we had a right-wing minority government before that. So I think we are building the track record of how do you actually take things forward in an organized way for the best of the country, even when you have a minority government.
Let me ask the question perhaps from a different angle. How far or near do you think that a potential downturn is? What kind of thinking do you have regarding that? And when do you see perhaps a global slowdown impacting Scandinavian economies and Northern Europe overall?
Well, I used to be an economist way back, but now I work for an exchange, so it's not for me to really have an estimate of the next economic recession is going to hit either our markets or Europe or the global economy. But I would just reiterate what I said, that the Swedish economy currently is doing fine. It's developing very favorably, and we definitely see growth going forward as well. You know, whenever it ends, that we'll take that day and we'll handle that as well.
What's your thinking regarding the exchange rate at the moment? The Swedish krona is weak, which means that the OMX S30 index has actually ticked higher in krona terms, but if you look at it, for instance, in dollar terms, it's still underperforming US markets, for instance. How do you look at that exchange rate issue?
Yeah, well, the US market is especially strong this year, especially Nasdaq 100 index is up by clear double-digit numbers, so very few countries can compete with that. I think that the kind of independent currency for Sweden has been a bit of a blessing in the post-financial crisis time period. But yes, I do agree that it looks, on the face of it, it looks a bit weak. And it relates, of course, to the interest rate policy. And I think that both Europe and Sweden over time would need to try to normalize interest rates. And I think that then, you know, whatever the currency rate is going to be, that's what we're going to have. But so far, I mean, Sweden is a small, open economy, very much dependent on exports, and having a little bit of flexibility with its own currency has actually been a part of the success story of Sweden over the past 10 years, I would say.